Okay, special episode today on resilience. What makes people resilient, the different factors of resilience, what people get wrong about resilience, how to be more resilient. This is a bit of a specialist topic. I've been working on this area for quite a few years, particularly how not to go insane in areas of conflict. That was one of my main areas. Sort of trained various major NGOs on that, sort of big people you've heard of. In my own life, it's also been an important personal factor. I had a relatively difficult childhood in ways I won't go into now, and relatively big problems in my teenage years, and basically had to learn to be resilient. In my own life, last year had a tough year, definitely applying a lot of those principles. So I say this from the point of view of sort of studying it, having read the books, having taught it around the world, including in 6 different war zones, something like that now. So really all over the place. Founding Sane Ukraine charity a couple of years ago, but also from a place of sort of imperfection. This isn't like, yeah, I've got this all sorted. Sometimes it's definitely physician heal thyself, I find. Okay, so where to begin? I always often start when I do workshops on resilience on the body, just saying, before we even get into Embodied, just health. Most people in the modern world aren't very well, okay? And I'm probably going to have to say this a number of times. We are in conditions, like for example, just the modern food that is available to most people, yet we still have choices. So generally people on the left will say it's not your fault, it's conditions. People on the right will say take responsibility. They're both right. Okay, so I'm going to say at the beginning, maybe I don't have to keep saying it throughout, but physical health is one of those areas that most people can at least influence for the better. The basis of think of it like a pyramid, the basis of your mental, emotional, spiritual health is your physical health. Now, it's not to say you can't be mentally well if you're physically unwell. There are people who do that. However, it's a hell of a lot easier. Just think common sense. When you've got food in your belly, when you're exercising regularly, when you've had enough sleep, these are the basics, right? The absolute basics. Physical health, absolutely a no-brainer in terms of your resilience, in terms of your ability to bounce back. Yeah. Probably should do a quick definition of resilience. So to bounce back from pressure or stress, to handle adversity, grace under fire. There are many different definitions of what resilience is, but usually it's something about bouncing back from pressure and stress. Notice this isn't the same as just sort of toughness. First mistake a lot of people make is they think resilience is about toughness. You've got to be, it's like taking a hit. Sometimes I give the analogy of a boxer. Resilience is much more about the clever boxer who dodges punches, the one who just gets repeatedly hit in the head but can take it to a degree. Yeah. All right, so physical factors, and I can't emphasize those enough. Like sleep, for example, is just a superpower. Most people aren't getting enough sleep. There's books on this, studies on this. It's when you restore emotionally, physically, spiritually. I think it's underemphasized because no one's really selling it. I mean, aside from like eye masks or earplugs or something, people aren't really selling sleep, and there's not a lot to say. I mean, there are sleep coaches, like we had Masha on the podcast. People that talk about the basics of caffeine intake around sleep, of not having a lit room, your whole kind of sleep schedule, tech, which I'll come to in a bit. So there are factors around that. Food, again, for resilience, people talk a lot about specific diets. I mean, whole foods, some kind of a balanced diet, not anything too crazy. That seems to be what's best for most people, though, of course, there are individual differences. And what does food mean to you is a big one. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a fry up the other day, British fried breakfast. That's like soul food to me, right? But if I ate that every day, I wouldn't be so healthy. So, got to balance a few factors out. Like, so I'm eating with a friend tonight. I'm probably not eating the food I would choose to if I was at mine, but the social aspect of food, the Mediterraneans understand this really well, which is going to bring us into the social stuff, which I'm going to come to shortly. But yeah, there's more to food than just, vitamins and calories and things like that. Okay, exercise, the other big one. Do some, okay? In terms of why that makes people more resilient, one is just the pure health level, massively important. The other one is that you're deliberately doing something difficult. And this is kind of a principle that I'll come back to probably several times in this video or podcast, which will be deliberately doing something difficult to a degree which is hard, but not damaging or traumatic. What do we call that? If it's done intentionally and repeatedly, it's called training. Yeah. So how do we become more resilient? We train ourselves to adversity. You've really only got one system for dealing with adversity. That's fight flight and being able to manage your fight flight response. So you need some system. Like exercise could be that. Could be cold showers. Could be hard yoga. You know, it could be getting your friend to shout at you every day. Whatever. You need some sort of system where you can train handling pressure and stress. The most resilient people I know have a mostly easy, relaxed life, like making most of your life not stressful, so you're not just being ground down, but parts of their life where they're deliberately getting very stressed. And the deliberately is important. It's not just training is different from life, right? Life is just hitting you randomly. Training is you deliberately go somewhere. And the gym is a really good example where you put the weights on, where you do something hard on purpose. There. Get used to doing hard things. You get better at able to regulate yourself during hard things. So a little bit more than just physical health is the skill of self-regulation. You may learn that through exercise, you may learn that through cold showers or ice baths or anything difficult where you're learning self-regulation skills. Of all the kinds of regulation, I normally say there are four. So there's self-regulation, co-regulation, eco-regulation, and theo-regulation, or meaning or spirit. Self-regulation in some ways is the least important one, but it's the, in terms of its impact, the least powerful, but it's the one you have the most control over. Yeah? You have the most control over. So self-regulation, you know, learn centering skills, get better at breath work, those basic embodiment skills is super helpful. Okay, let's track back. How do you know you're going to need to use the self-regulation skills to be more resilient? Body awareness. So this is where not just physical health, but embodiment comes in. So mindfulness of the body, being consistently aware of more of the body, more deeply, more of the time. Yeah, being aware of more of the body, more deeply, more of the time. So that skill, and it is a skill, it is something you can get better at, that is built with practice. And what it means is you notice when you need to regulate. You notice the little alarms going off that let you know you're getting run down, that you need to be on your own. So sometimes I'll say like this, you know, four basic ways of resourcing. So stillness and movement, aloneness and sociability. Which one of those four do you need? It depends how tuned into yourself you are. So this is the body awareness part of this, yeah? It's a foundation for all the other things. It might just seem like a sort of nice mindfulness skill, but it's more than that because it lets you know how everything else is doing. Okay, so physical health basics, embodiment, particularly so body awareness and self-regulation. All right, let's move on to sort of psychological side. I don't think you can think yourself resilient. That being said, it is useful to be aware of cognitive biases, of thinking skills, things like locus of control. Do you think things can be within your control, or are you in a victim mindset? This is one that I've seen really makes people less resilient, is if they hold that they're in a victim mindset. The other mindset actually is trying to change things you can't change, yeah, which is the mindset of frustration. Okay, this is really the heart of it. You probably heard the serenity prayer. Grant me the courage to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We can actually turn that into a 2x2 sort of grid. If you're trying to change things you can't change, that's frustration. And that isn't going to end well either. That's not making anyone resilient. Equally, to accept the things you can't change makes you serene. That's the yin of resilience. Balanced with the yang of agency or locus of control, which is trying to change things you can. Yeah, victimhood is not trying to change things that you can. So it makes sense. So we can think of that as healthy and unhealthy yin and yang. So acceptance, healthy yin; agency, healthy yang. And then unhealthy yin would be passivity or victimhood. Unhealthy yang would be frustration, resentment, that kind of thing. All right. So do look up sort of the psychology. You know, positive thinking can become a tyranny. It's overstated quite often in the West, but it does have its place. I'm not one who believes in sort of manifestation, the secret, and things like that. I think it's narcissism and absolute bullshit, frankly. People like to think they have magic powers. Believing you have magic powers doesn't make you more resilient. Yeah. Interestingly, religious belief does, and I'm going to come back to that. But thinking you personally can, magically alter the universe in ways you clearly can't, isn't helpful. Isn't helpful. Okay, so look at thinking errors, things like catastrophizing. Once you learn these, you get better at spotting them, personalizing. There's various ones, and it's useful to read about them. It's useful to read about some of these thinking errors. It's all my fault. Yeah, mind reading. I know what people are thinking. There's a bunch of thinking errors, and CBT is good at these. I think they're a useful addition. I think without some of the other stuff I'm talking about, they're on their own. They're not going to cut it. But basically, thinking mildly optimistic can be helpful. Some studies show that mild pessimism means you're actually less likely to get into trouble. I think there's a sort of mild optimism that can be helpful. Just to give a silly example, I remember, going up to a girl. I was about to go ask her out when I was younger, and I thought to myself, maybe she doesn't like me, and I thought maybe she does. I thought, hang on a minute, what's the best thing for me to think here? The best thing for me to think is that she probably likes me, because if it's true, great, and if it's not true, well, also okay. I'm still going to get the message here. I'm not, psychotic in terms of, if there's other feedback to the other side. But in terms of the cost-benefit analysis there, I lose nothing if I go up to her and say hello and she doesn't like me, but I lose something if she does. So it's way better for me to think about that positively. Does it make sense? Yeah. So often sort of a little bit of positive thinking without being totally removed from reality is helpful there. I think ultimately the most resilient thing is always being in contact with truth. And this is where we get quite philosophical, because the love of truth is not common. It's not that common. The love of truth is, most people, what they really love is convenience and feeling good about themselves, maintaining their self-esteem, maintaining their relationships, being conflict avoidant. The love of truth is sometimes in the short term uncomfortable and unpleasant and causes conflict. Ultimately, you want to know where the wolves are and where the buffaloes are. The love of truth is, I'd say, at the heart of being resilient. The heart of being resilient. Another major one, psychologically, gratitude. Lots of studies show that that's important. I like to do bowing gratitude, or verbally, or making lists, not just in my head. That's something that's been shown time and time again, both short and long term, to make a difference, in wisdom traditions and in positive psychology. It's another one I should probably mention at this point. Gratitude, again, really goes into the kind of spiritual side of things, of gratitude for life. There's the idea that life is all a conspiracy to help you grow and learn, as a kind of a fun frame to try on. That might well be a resilient frame. There's other frames that can be resilient, but that's a fun one. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to maybe the most important part of resilience. So most important part of resilience is inter-resilience. So far we've been talking about psychology and embodiment. In the West, we tend to think of things individually, but actually you're as resilient as your relationships. Yeah, humans are social animals. If a baby cries, we don't tell it to do yoga. We make noises. We move with it. We speak to the baby. It's social. It's connection. Yeah, co-regulation is by far the most powerful thing in terms of resilience. There's different forms of it, and I think they're all valid. Think of this in terms of like friends you need in your life, right? You need encouraging friends. Like, I know this as a mentor. So many of my mentees just need a bit of fucking encouragement. It's like, go do the thing. You can do the thing. Yeah, that's my main job. I'm not saying anything clever. Yeah, a friend who encourages you, but there's also a friend who really listens to you. Really empathic friend who deeply listens to you. I don't know. One of my colleagues today was saying she was a bad mum because she raised her voice to her child, and I just said, I won't say her name, but let's call her Sarah. That's not her name. I said, Sarah, are you perfect as a mum? And I realised she was being hard on herself. I helped her sort of think more clearly. I said, do you beat your kids? She said, no. I said, do you mostly loving and kind to your children? She's like, yes, of course. I said, okay, so, given that you're a single mum and you don't have much support, how are you doing? She said, I'm doing okay. So that was the, helping her kind of reframe her thinking, which was very self-critical and self-blaming. But it was also that I just listened to her a little bit. Yeah, it wasn't just a coaching. And it was only for a few minutes before a work call. And you could just see the weight drop off her. We all need that. And now she's got probably 5 friends, one boss and a couple of colleagues who are nice and a few other people in her life who can do that. Let's say there's 10 people in her life who will give her at least a little bit of a listening to regularly. she's so much better off than someone who doesn't have, that many friends and colleagues who will be empathic. Yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. Like as a boss, for example, I'm not naturally the most empathic person in the world. I'm certainly not the best listener. But I like who I work with, and it's relatively easy for me to at least give a little bit of empathy for what when times are tough, and that is just helps people be so much more resilient. Okay, so we've got encouragement, we've got empathy, we've got humour. Sometimes you don't need a friend to be deeply listening to. You need a friend that just like fucking laugh with, just be silly with, just be hysterical with. Like I think that's really underrated. Of course, there is anti-resilient humour, like sometimes humour that leads us away from connection with self and other. By the way, connection is at the core of all this. Connection to self, connection to other people. We'll come to a couple more types of connection soon. Touch, another social support one. We need touch. That's a basic human need. Everyone needs a hug. Yeah. Erotic connection could be part of this for most, not everyone, but most people. I think that definitely makes you more resilient. I don't know about you, but when you've had that, when you the next day you wake up, you've got that post-shag strut bouncing down the street, you're bulletproof, nothing can hurt you. There's something about sex which is deeply nourishing, assuming it's consensual loving, etc. So yeah, I think books on resilience that don't mention sex for me is like what are you talking about? Like why would you miss that out? Okay, so there's other aspects of social support. Oh, practical. Like this is another one. Like you can't be good at everything. Having a friend that can put shelves up or fix things. I've got a mate, Lee. He just fixes everything. He's brilliant at it. If he comes around your house, he's fixing things. He's a proper bloke. Lovely Lee if you're out there. Yeah, that's just a brilliant thing to have that practical. There's like love languages, but they're also forms of support we need. There's a few others, but they're some of the main social ones. I think these are super important. Like our resilience network is what matters. We're inter-resilient. Mostly we're living in a relationally atrophied world. The village has been destroyed. By the village, I mean our sort of Paleolithic mutual care and support. The extended family no longer exists in many places, so people are trying to raise kids without that, like my poor colleague. We don't have the cultural resonance. I know this is going to be uncomfortable for some of my left-leaning audience, but multicultural societies may have some benefits. I like a curry, but they don't give you that strong sense of resonance of being around your people, your tribe. I think that's massive for resilience. And if I look at the mental health of people in big multicultural cities, it's not so great. And the subcultures that do have that, let's say it's a group of Orthodox Jews in North London or something like that, that's massively, massively important. That being with your people, and that might not be like an ethnic group. It might be like punks, right? It might be, I don't know, hippies, whatever. Different groups, gamers. Different groups are out there. That identities aren't just in terms of like nationality or ethnicity. But yeah, we all need to be around people that have similar values to us, that have similar norms to us. Okay, so social support, cultural aspect of that. As I said, we just underline this. We profoundly need this, and we're profoundly lacking this compared to our ancestors. That's a fact. All right. Next piece. So nature. That we are eco-resilient, we are eco-regulated, your ability to be in contact with nature. More broadly, we could say our environment, order and beauty is the key thing. Order and beauty in the environment. Like there's some things of water over there and a couple of bits of clothes. It's like, yeah, it kind of gets at me a little bit. We are far more resilient when we're in ordered, beautiful environments, and the natural world is magic. I take groups to do embodiment in nature, and the stress, I don't have to do anything. I have to do meditation or yoga. You can do all that. It's fine. Self-regulation, all that. But the stress just drops off people when you're in nature. Like regular contact in nature, particularly movement in nature, particularly communal movement in nature. Now we're adding all these layers, right, of things I've been discussing. So helpful. So helpful. Yeah. Okay, last one of the big four. Theoregulation, we need meaning. So people are resilient when they have meaning in their life, when they're on purpose, when they're doing something that makes sense to them, that's deeply aligned with their values. This is psychological, but it's more than that. This, yes, may include going into trance states regularly. You know, for some people it's psychedelics. For some people it's sitting in a quiet church. And there's lots and lots of ways to access the divine, to access spirit. You know, the body, community, nature. These are all gateways. These things aren't independent. What I've said, like that is so not to be underestimated. It's one of the most powerful forces in the world, and studies do show that people with a religious practice, religious affinity, and a religious practice are way more resilient than people without. And if you think of like people who have achieved great things, you know, whether it's Martin Luther King or various heroes you might have, often there's a religious underpinning there. This is a little bit uncomfortable for the sort of spiritual but not religious crowd. I think there's a reason why almost every culture in human history was religious. Not to say one has to be fundamentalist. I know people have bad experiences; they might, you know, be uncomfortable with this. But there's a reason that religion has been so popular over the years. It helps give people meaning. It helps people survive. It helps people reproduce, thrive, evolve, all those things. So, a deep sense of spiritual belonging and meaning. If you think of it as well, if you think of all of these, if unresilience is about disconnection, then the ultimate connection is being one with everything, right? The oceanic feeling of spiritual connection is, it's like if you're on your own against the universe and it's you just trying to control life, it's terrifying. It's an absolutely terrifying proposition. But the feeling that you're one with things, you're at least connected to things, all of a sudden everything's a lot less scary, isn't it? Yeah, everything's a lot less scary. So, yes, spirituality can include practices like prayer, meditation, of course. You know, meditation is presented as a bit of a cure-all these days, but I think it does have its place in terms of, you know, quiet time, we call it in some groups I go to, metta meditation as well as mindfulness. Meditation also goes much deeper than people think in terms of like if you want really deep resilience, yeah, deep states of meditation and deep changes to oneself on a long term are possible and powerful when it comes to real resilience. Cool. One thing I also want to mention, another factor here is economics. So I think this is not talked about nearly enough by psychologists. This is one that we have some influence over, obviously, but not total influence over. And it's someone in Sudan listening to this who's, you know, having a tough life. When we're skint, that's kind of like our hierarchy of needs, our basic needs, survival needs are threatened. And that really makes being resilient very difficult. I'm a big believer that it should be a safety net for people so no one feels this state of just continuous anxiety, oh, I'm not going to be able to survive, how am I going to get my basic needs met? You know, I haven't really talked about trauma very much. Obviously, addressing your trauma is a big part of resilience. Trauma makes you fragile unless you work through it to the point of post-traumatic growth. But the economic factors is like that feeling of unsafety one would find with trauma just constantly nagging away. So I think we need to really talk about that a lot more, a lot more. Okay, there's lots more I can say about resilience in terms of psychology, in terms of embodiment, the social side I could go more into, the spiritual side I could go more into. We've got a course coming up on this. We've got a free event on deep resilience, like what makes people not resilient, where I'm going to look at some of the deeper factors. If you're listening on YouTube or the podcast, go to embodimentunlimited.com and then you'll get on the newsletter list. You'll hear about the free event. There's loads of free resources there as well. Good stuff for coaches. My book is there for free as a PDF. So yeah, lots of stuff there. And as I said, we're going to do a free event where we can go a little bit deeper into this, and then we usually do a course as well. So if you want to go really into it, look at the course.